They smashed his Ferrari, laughed in his face. Then the SWAT team showed up faster than a pizza delivery. James had just finished his morning espresso when the first knock hit, not a polite tap, but the kind that made neighbors peek through blinds and dogs start barking. He opened the front door slowly, eyes narrowing at the three men standing on his lawn like they owned it. "Your Ferrari's out of compliance," one barked, gesturing at the blood-red 812 Superfast parked perfectly in his driveway. "Move it, or we'll impound it on behalf of the HOA." James blinked. "Impound it? For what?" "It's parked in my driveway." The tallest one, with mirrored sunglasses and a clipboard, jabbed his pen toward the front bumper. "Your tint violates community code, and your exhaust system's over decibel limits. Section 5.4, excessive nonconformity. It's got to go." There was no Section 5.4. James knew the HOA handbook like the back of his Honda, was one of the original property investors here, long before the trees lined the sidewalks. "Show me your credentials," he said evenly. "We don't have all day, sir," the third man interrupted, ignoring the request. "Final warning. Move it." James didn't move. Neither did they. 30 seconds of silence passed. That's when the guy with the clipboard reached into their truck's flatbed and pulled out what looked like a crowbar. James's heart thudded once. "Don't, too late." The first crunch sent a bolt of nausea through his spine. The steel rod smashed through the Ferrari's headlight like it was sugar glass. A neighbor gasped from a second-floor balcony. The second blow carved a dent the size of a football into the hood. The third shattered the side mirror, pieces of carbon fiber flying like shrapnel. James didn't scream. He didn't rush them. He just stood there, jaw locked, hand tightening around the phone in his pocket. They finished their compliance enforcement in under 2 minutes, tossed the rod back in the truck, and sped off, tires screeching as they disappeared around the corner. One of them flipped him off. James made 2 calls. First, the HOA's real one. He reached the assistant secretary, who offered a tight-lipped apology and a copy of the compliance charter. "These men," he said carefully, "do not work for you." "I'm afraid I can't confirm that, sir," she replied, voice full of the kind of vague fear people have when they're being watched. "There are third-party enforcement units we sometimes use, but I don't have their names on file." "Do you know they just vandalized my vehicle?" To him, "Not sure what you want me to do, Mr. Harper." He hung up. One breath in, one out. Then he made the second call. This one didn't go to voicemail. "Tom," he said, "I need a favor. I'm cashing that chip you owe me." "What happened?" Tom's voice was crisp, alert, military clear. "Some men pretending to be HOA cops just totaled my car and threatened me on my own property." Silence. "Give me a license plate." By the time James finished collecting the broken mirror off his driveway, the truck was gone. But a neighbor that only one brave enough to approach stepped up with a digital photo taken through her upstairs window. Grainy, but readable, a black GMC with out-of-state plates. He texted it to Tom. "Tag this." 15 minutes later, James stood in his garage, staring at the place where the Ferrari had once gleamed. Instead, it looked like a corpse, glass shards and dented metal covered in the morning sun's unforgiving glow. A slow anger simmered behind his ribs, not just for the car, not even for the damage, but for the insult, the performance, the way those men had looked him in the eye like they knew he wouldn't fight back. Viewer prompt. What would you do if armed impersonators wrecked your car and your community stayed silent? Would you call the cops or handle it yourself? James didn't know if the police would do anything, but he knew someone who would. Tom Reynolds wasn't just a SWAT captain. He was one of James's oldest protégés. Years ago, James had taught tactical psychology to federal security teams, and Tom had been his brightest student. Their last mission together had ended in a courtroom, not a battlefield, but the bond held firm. Now Tom stood beside him, scrolling through the plate number on his tablet. Trucks registered in Nevada. Commercial license, expired 3 months ago. That means it's floating under the DMV's radar. Deliberate. Tom nodded. Almost certainly. But here's the twist. Last time this plate pinged a traffic cam was 2 blocks from a shut-down strip mall in Rivert. James arched an eyebrow. That place hasn't had tenants in years. Exactly, Tom said. Want to go for a drive? They parked a block away. The strip mall looked like every other ghost plaza in the suburbs, chipped paint, boarded-up glass, weeds pushing through cracked pavement. But as they watched from Tom's unmarked Explorer, movement betrayed the lie. Three men walked out of a former vape shop, wearing the same uniforms as the ones from that morning. One carried a clipboard, another a taser. They moved with routine, deliberate, like they'd done this dozens of times. "See that?" Tom said. "And there's a second group coming from the barber shop. This isn't a crew, it's a school." James's pulse tightened. "They're training people." Tom snapped a few photos with his long lens. "We'll need a warrant to go in. Or a probable cause break." That break came sooner than expected. 48 hours later, one of James's neighbors, Amir, a quiet engineer with a daughter in preschool, went missing. His wife pounded on James's door in tears, saying Amir had confronted one of the compliance teams about a bogus fine taped to their garage. He never came home. James didn't say anything. He just texted Tom, "Now it's personal." When Amir reappeared 2 days later, he was thinner, his lips split, and he didn't answer when asked where he'd been. "They told me not to talk," he murmured to James, avoiding eye contact. "They said they know where my daughter goes to school." James's fists curled involuntarily. Viewer prompt: if someone threatened your family for speaking up, would you stay quiet or fight back, even alone? Tom ran the photo of the clipboard guy through facial recognition. "Here's something. He's not just a thug's a former sheriff's deputy, let go 2 years ago for disciplinary irregularities. He's now registered to a private security firm. Guess where its office is listed?" James didn't blink. "The strip mall." Tom smiled grimly. "Ding. This thing's bigger than HOA games. It's systemic. They're running organized impersonation squads across multiple communities. Extortion. Worse, control. People pay not to be harassed, pay to be in compliance, pay not to be watched." James leaned forward. "Then let's make them feel watched for once." Tom tapped the tablet, bringing up a tactical grid. "Operation Glass House starts tomorrow at dawn. Full containment. You want in?" James didn't hesitate. "You already know the answer." At 4:30 a.m., the SWAT convoy rolled out under cover of darkness, 3 black vans, 1 mobile command unit, and a quiet observer in the back seat. James, dressed in gray, watching through a slit in the blinds. He wasn't just here to see justice. He needed to know why. Tom briefed the team in whispers. "Target structure has 3 entry points. Suspects may be armed with tasers, chemical deterrents, or illegally obtained sidearms. Priority 1, preserve evidence. Priority 2, control communications. Priority 3, extraction of digital storage." James didn't flinch. He'd heard this language before, in a different life, in different cities. At 5:12, the breach began. 3 loud pops, flashbangs, then the front shuttered entrance blew open. Boots thundered in, voices barking commands, lights snapping on across the plaza like a stage show beginning. James stood behind bulletproof glass in the command van, listening through the radio feed. Room 1 clear. Room 2 bingo. Files, laptops, backup drives. Suspect attempting to delete, halted. Room 3 wasn't clear. One of the fake HOA leaders triggered a wall-mounted latch and vanished through a concealed side panelon escape tunnel, barely visible unless you knew where to look. Suspect on foot, northwest corridor, repeat, fleeing. A pair of agents pursued him into the storm drain access. James's stomach twisted. "You said they only had 3 exits." "They do," Tom muttered, "unless someone built their own." Inside the raid zone, officers uncovered blueprints not for homes, but for gated communities. The layouts were detailed, with notes like access blind spots, low visibility patrol hours, and non-responsive owners. One file was labeled Revenue Recovery Targets Q3. Underneath were names, addresses, photos. James's was at the top of the list. Beside it, Luxury Class Asset / Test Case, Escalation Recommended. Tom swore under his breath. They're testing how far they can push it, seeing how much people will tolerate before someone calls real law enforcement. "They underestimated one thing," James said. "What's that?" "I used to train law enforcement." One of the detained suspects began to talk. He was scared, shaking, younger than expected, barely mid-20s. "They said it was legal," he stammered. "They said we were just enforcing contracts people had already signed. They gave us scripts, told us to say we were with the compliance agency." "Who gave you orders?" Tom asked. The man looked down. "A guy named Victor. But nobody used his real name. They called him the auditor." James froze. He remembered that name. Years ago, a corporate fixer had tried to recruit him into a private policy enforcement outfit, promised six figures to oversee behavior normalization in high-value zones. James had turned him down flat. And now he's running a scam empire out of a vape shop, James muttered. Tom turned. You know him? I know his playbook. Viewer prompt. Ever met someone who made legal sound like a weapon? Would you expose them or let it slide if the money flowed? Back at HQ, one of the officers brought James a sealed envelope found in the data room. Inside were printed photos all of his daughter, walking home from school, at the grocery store, getting ice cream. Each was labeled Asset Leverage Option, Tier 1. James didn't speak, didn't blink, but his hands shook for the first time in years. Tom grabbed the folder. We're locking everything down. This isn't a prank, this is organized coercion. They were watching my family, James said. You're not on the target list anymore, Tom replied. You're at the center of it. The sirens grew louder, then stopped cold outside a suburban data center just off the interstate. From the outside, it looked like a neutral tech warehouse, gray walls, no signage, two security lights that blinked in lazy cycles. But the badge on the gate had the same HOA Compliance Authority logo as the clipboard from James's front yard. Tom's second SWAT team moved in fast. The power was cut, comms jammed, and within 8 minutes, the building was cleared. What they found inside was worse than expected. Rows of servers, walls of file cabinets, not just targeting James, but entire neighborhoods. Community names were color-coded by vulnerability. Passive, high yield, needs reinforcement. Some had notes, board in pocket or gate override access acquired. One terminal was still live, showing maps of upcoming enforcement zones, name lists, and compliance risk scores. At the bottom was a locked directory titled VR Archive, password protected but timestamped as accessed just hours before. Tom's team froze the entire system. That's our vault, he muttered. Every scheme, every contact, every victim. If we get this decrypted, it's game over. But the auditor wasn't in either building. James had a theory and told Tom where to look. 2 years ago, he pitched me on a private compliance startup. Said he already had 5 communities under passive contract. Wanted me as the facie a clean record, local ties, military resume. What did you say? Tom asked. James scoffed. I told him to choke on his clipboard. Tom chuckled. You always had a way with diplomacy. The location James suggested was just across the county line, a private home inside a double-gated compound. Tom made the call. This time, they didn't knock. They found him in the basement, no weapon, no resistance, just a man in a tailored shirt sipping black coffee in front of 4 monitors showing split feeds from neighborhoods across the region. You took your time, he said without turning. You're under arrest, Tom replied, voice like granite. For what? The auditor said with a smile. Providing structure, enforcing expectations. I filled a void the city refused to manage. James stepped into the room. You filled it with fear. No, the auditor said, finally standing. I filled it with results. No one likes authority until the wrong neighbor paints their house purple. Tom cuffed him. People like you don't last long, James said. The auditor leaned forward. I lasted long enough to put your family in my files. James didn't respond. He just walked out. In the weeks that followed, the case exploded. News outlets dubbed it the HOA hoax, the largest known organized impersonation ring in modern suburbia. The real HOA boards were subpoenaed. Some had been complicit, others clueless. One board president admitted to accepting compliance incentives in exchange for silence. The city council drafted new legislation requiring all third-party enforcement agents to be licensed, recorded, and visibly identified. Any impersonation attempt became a felony. James gave a closed-door testimony, no press, no cameras, just his voice and a file of photos he refused to let go of. A month later, a small crowd gathered at an estate auction downtown. Among the items, a Ferrari 812 Superfast, freshly restored. When the auctioneer read out the winning bid, the room went quiet. James stood, hands in his pockets, and shook his head. I didn't buy it, he said. They returned it. Said it was the least they could do. Reflective closing paragraph. James didn't tell many people what really happened. Most just saw the car, the headlines, and assumed he'd won. But it wasn't about revenge. It was about making sure no one else answered their door at 7 a.m. and felt powerless. It was about reminding people that silence only feeds wolves, and sometimes the best response to fake authority is to call in the real thing. When the system plays pretend, the truth is the loudest weapon.